Those who know the right questions must reach those asking the wrong ones, and sometimes even the lost. I protect my identity because truth has a body count. Welcome to the Anarchist File. You don't know what you're capable of until someone tries to take your child from you. Not in theory, not emotionally. Literally. When you're in court in a suit you had to borrow, listening to a woman who once called you her world, explain to a judge why you unfit to see the child you created. That's when you understand what this machine is. You're not a man anymore. You're a liability. A wallet with a pulse. The American family court is not a court of justice. It's a transfer station. A quiet room where they extract your time, your assets, your soul, and call it in the best interest of the child. They don't mean your child. They mean her lifestyle. They mean her comfort. They mean a system where she wins by default, and you fight uphill for the right to be called dad by someone who looks like you and cries when you leave. Ask anyone who's been through it. The truth comes quick. Love doesn't matter. Stability doesn't matter. Evidence barely matters. You walk in thinking fatherhood counts? That being the provider, protector, first open the morning father, earns you something. But it doesn't. What matters is optics, narrative, and gender. And if you're not the mother, you're a support system by force. Financial, not emotional. This is the part nobody tells boys. They'll teach you how to ask a girl out, how to use a condom, how to be a supportive partner. But they won't teach you how to prepare for war if the relationship ends. They won't tell you custody court is a casino where the odds are written in ink. That if she files first, she sets the tempo. That if she cries right, she gets the house, the car, the weekends, and your last name on paperwork, designed to outlive your sanity. They don't prepare you for the humiliation of supervised visitation, of watching your child play with a plastic kitchen set under a two-way mirror, of being reduced to a visitor. You're not dad anymore. You're father of the minor. A footnote on your own legacy. And the worst part, you can't even rage about it. You have to nod and smile and comply. One wrong move, one text out of tone, and it's used against you. This isn't paranoia. It's precedent. 1 in 4 children now lives without a biological, adoptive, or stepfather in the home. That's not a stat. That's a slow-motion collapse of civilization, and we treat it like weather, like something that just happens. But fatherlessness isn't natural. It's engineered. By systems, by incentives, by judges who assume mom equals nurturer and dad equals paycheck, by media that treats fathers like punchlines and tells men they're only valuable if they disappear without a fight. And we wonder why boys are lost, why girls can't pair bond, why chaos looks like culture now. Because when you remove the anchor from the home, the boat drifts. Every time. There's no replacement for a strong father, no program, no school, no therapist. The presence of a great dad is like gravity, it holds everything together. And when that's gone, you get resentment. Rootlessness, rage with no aim. People ask, where are all the good dads? They're in the system, bro. Filing appeals. Crying into steering wheels. Taking second jobs to cover child support for kids they barely see. And still showing up. Because that's what real fathers do, even when they're punished for it. You want to know the real epidemic? It's not absentee dads. It's the silent war on present ones. The men who fight tooth and nail to stay in their kids' lives and get told they're recontrolling. The men who ask for 50/50th custody and get laughed out of court. The men who miss a payment because inflation beat the algorithm, and now they're felons. That's the epidemic. Men who care getting crushed. And society has the audacity to blame them for disappearing. But here's what they didn't count on. We talk now. The shame cycle is breaking. Men compare notes, share docs, trade lawyer names like stock tips. The group chats are alive. The podcasts are global. And the truth is spreading faster than they can gaslight. We know now, this isn't about gender equality. It's about control. When a woman leaves, she gets support. When a man leaves, he gets suspicion. When she cries, she's heard. When he cries, he's a threat. And when it comes to parenting, she gets the benefit of the doubt. He gets drug tests. That's the split. Not because it's just, but because it's profitable. 4 courts. 4 lawyers. For the $50 billion divorce industry that feeds off broken homes. There's a reason every high-value man you know is paranoid. He's seen the inside of the beast, or he knows someone who has, and he's not going in blind. No more signing marriage licenses like loyalty pledges. No more trusting that the system will see the truth. No more playing defense in a game designed to bleed you. The smart ones are learning the law before they ever fall in love. They're documenting, vetting, preparing. They're protecting their future children before they even meet the mother. Because fatherhood is too important to gamble, and too sacred to outsource to a judge who sees you as a line item. They say masculinity is in crisis, but that's a lie. Masculinity isn't in crisis, it's in exile. Banished from schools, mocked in media, pathologized by therapists who wouldn't survive a single day in the lives of the men they try to treat. The truth is simpler. The masculine archetype still works. It just doesn't fit inside the system anymore. So they call it toxic. But what they really mean is threatening, not to women, not to children, but to institutions. Because the fully realized man, the disciplined, unshakable, competent father isn't easy to exploit. He doesn't kneel. He doesn't overshare. He doesn't outsource his authority. He's grounded, not performative. Dangerous, not disposable. And they hate that. That's why the courts are built to punish him. Because he's competition. He's not chaotic enough to need saving, not broken enough to be molded. The state doesn't need a strong father. It needs obedient providers. Men who keep paying, keep complying, keep quiet. And if you resist, they call you bitter. They say you have anger issues. They prescribe compliance in pill form and call it healing. But stoicism is not a disorder. Self-mastery is not repression. Men don't need more permission to cry. They need space to lead. And that starts at home. A real father doesn't parent from the sidelines. He's not a co-star. He's not just there to pick up the kids every other weekend and send money twice a month. He's not a backup plan. He's the blueprint. He teaches resilience, presence, boundaries, not with lectures, but with how he lives. He becomes the baseline for what his sons aspire to and what his daughters expect. You remove that man from the equation, and you, Don T, just break a household, you break a legacy. And they know that, which is why they try to replace him with systems, subsidies, screen time, diagnoses, labels, bureaucracies, anything but the masculine presence that actually fixes the problem. The state wants your child dependent, confused, easy to medicate, hard to lead. And the best way to get that outcome is by cutting the father out. So here we are. Modern fatherhood is an act of rebellion. Loving your kids, leading them, protecting them in a system that wants them fragmented, that's radical now. And the men who do it, they're not celebrated. They're audited, monitored, threatened, because strong fathers create children who don't need the system. And the system can't survive that. But we're adapting. We're building outside the lines. Men are waking up not with slogans, but with strategy. They're documenting everything. They're using prenups with teeth. They're vetting before they ever invest. They're not just reading books about fatherhood, they're reading family law. They know which states favor 50-50th custody. They track court outcomes like fantasy football stats. This isn't fear, it's preparation. Because we've learned the hard way. Love is not enough. Good intentions don't beat bad policy. You can be the perfect dad and still lose your kids to a lie. One accusation, one manipulated moment, one family court hearing where your ex brings photos and tears and a lawyer who's done this 200 times and you re-outs. Fighting to see your own DNA with a visitation schedule that treats you like a criminal on parole. It's not fair, but it's real. And the solution isn't whining. It's winning. That means leverage, documentation, income you control, relationships you lead, a mindset that sees past the emotion and into the game being played. High-value fathers don't argue, they operate. They don't threaten, they plan. They don't cry to the system, they build systems the system can't touch. That's why you're seeing so many men talk about sovereignty, about financial independence, digital income, location freedom. It's not just about lifestyle, it's about insurance. Insurance against a system that punishes proximity. Because if your life is rooted in a jurisdiction that favors your ex's feelings over your fatherhood, you've already lost. So they leave, quietly, strategically. They build networks with other men who get it. They trade strategies. They know which lawyers to use, which judges are biased, which custody evaluators lean feminist, which states will flip on a whim. It's not paranoia. It's survival. And they pass that knowledge on. Because that's what real fathers do. They don't just protect their own kids, they protect future fathers. We're done pretending the system will fix itself. It won't. There's too much money in broken homes. There's too much control in fractured families. Too many jobs tied to male failure. So we go around it. We build family cultures that don't rely on state validation. We lead relationships with clarity. We avoid chaotic women who see children as tools and courts as weapons. We build wealth that can't be frozen, identities that can't be slandered, and reputations that don't need public approval. This isn't about hate. It's about legacy. Because in 100 years, no one will remember your tweets, your job title, or your bench press. But they'll know if your children knew you loved them. If you stayed, if you fought, if you built a lineage instead of just a lifestyle. That's what real fatherhood is. Not just presence, but power. Channeled. Calm in the storm. Strength without apology. Discipline without spectacle. A lighthouse that doesn't chase ships it, just stands and shines. They can't fake that, and they can't replace it. The world doesn't want to admit it, but fatherhood is upstream of civilization. Every thriving culture, every empire that actually built something lasting, understood that fathers weren't optional. They were central, not just biologically, spiritually, culturally, politically. The father was the cornerstone, the builder, the disciplinarian, the guardian of order. And once you tear that out, the whole thing caves in. Modern society did it anyway. They said fathers were outdated. The kids didn't need role models, they needed freedom. That discipline was violence. That masculinity was dangerous. That men should step aside so everyone else could step up. And what did we get? Chaos, confusion, epidemics of fatherless homes, male suicide, and emotional instability that no amount of gender theory can fix. They thought if they erased the father, the state could replace him. That child support checks were equal to paternal presence. That government programs and co-parenting apps would fill the hole. But it doesn't work like that. You can't code a father's presence. You can't automate a masculine role model. And you sure as hell can legislate fatherhood into being once you've driven him out of the home. That's why everything feels fake now. Why boys can't sit still. Why girls trust TikTok more than their own families. Why men zone out, drop out, or blow up. It's not just mental health. It's legacy sickness. They've been cut off from the masculine current, and they're starving, because men were built to serve something bigger, not just survive. Build, guide, sacrifice. Be seen by their sons as protectors. Be respected by their daughters as the first man who ever showed them boundaries. That's not Oceanette's elemental. You delete that, and the next generation grows up, spiritually homeless, and they are. You can feel it. The confusion, the addiction to chaos, the obsession with meaningless identities. Kids are trying to invent themselves because no one handed them a blueprint because dad was gone, or silenced, or turned into a paycheck with a gag order. And even now, if you speak up, they attack. If you say fathers matter, they call you regressive. If you say men need leadership, they say you're a elitist. If you say children do better with strong dads, they say you're erasing single moms. No, we're exposing a lie. Because this whole thing was never about equality, it was about control. A society without fathers is easier to manage, easier to medicate, easier to divide. Because when you break the masculine backbone, you don't just weaken the home, you weaken the man himself. And once that's done, who's left to resist? You think it's an accident that strong fathers are ridiculed on sitcoms, ignored in school policies, erased from cultural narratives? You think it's random that entire industries are built around managing male despair instead of preventing it? It's not an accident, it's a feature. And still, despite all that, millions of men wake up and show up every day. They grind, they build, they fight court battles most people couldn't stomach. They go to therapy not to cry, but to sharpen. They study law, strategy, real estate, crypto, not because it's trendy, but because they know legacy is earned, not inherited. That's the silent army. The men you don't see trending. The ones who don't post. The ones who are in the trenches, building parallel lives outside the algorithm, outside the court's reach, outside the influence of a culture that tried to neuter them. They don't need applause. They don't need validation. They need space. Because you can't outsource masculinity. You have to cultivate it. And that starts at home. Not with theory. With presence. With standards. With habits. A father is not a friend. He's not a buddy. He's not a co-parent when it's convenient. He's the immovable force that shapes who you become, whether you like it or not. And when that's gone, you can feel it in everything. In the music, in the dating market, in the way boys dress, in the way girls act. It's all symptomatic of fatherlessness. Not just physically, spiritually. The masculine North Star has gone dim, and we're repaying the price in depression stats and TikTok trends no one can explain without spiraling into academic nonsense. But here's the good news. Men are rebuilding it. Not in public schools. Not in corporate boardrooms. In gyms. In Discord servers. In group chats full of principles, reps, and receipts. Quiet places where men remember who they are. Where they call each other out, level each other up, and plan 5 moves ahead. These aren't influencers. They're insurgents. Builders. Strategists. Men who know that, to lead a family, you have to become unfireable, unbreakable, and unmoved by public opinion. That fatherhood doesn't begin when the baby's born. It begins when the man decides to become ungovernable. Because that's the secret they tried to bury. Fatherhood isn't weakness. It's power. It's the power to shape the next 100 years through a single decision. To walk away from chaos, choose one woman, and build a dynasty so solid it makes noise when you enter a room. The power to hand your children a life you never had, not through handouts, but through standards. It doesn't take 1 million followers. It takes one man, grounded, armed with clarity, and ready to make sacrifice his strategy. That's the revolution. Not hashtags, not speeches. Just men, returning to the center of the home, with conviction, with presence, with systems no court can cancel. They still don't get it. They think we want permission. That we're standing outside the gates begging for a role in our own families. That we need validation to lead. But we're past that. We don't need inclusion. We need independence. And the fathers who win aren't the ones trying to fix the system. They're the ones who outgrow it. This is the age of sovereign fatherhood. Not sponse, not license, not dependent, sovereign. Men who own their income, own their time, and most importantly own their identity. These aren't weekend dads. These are kings in exile. Building castles, off-grid, off-a-grid'em, and off-radar. Because that's the lesson. Once you've seen how the courts can twist love into leverage, once you've had your child weaponized against you, once you've been billed for presence and sued for silence, you stop asking for fairness. You build systems where the game can't touch you. That's where this is going. Exit over protest. Parallel lives over compromised ones. You don't negotiate with a machine designed to bleed you. You replace it, quietly, strategically, permanently. It starts with economics. The system has one leash: your paycheck, your W-2, your location, your inability to say no. You want to protect your kids? Then build an income no judge can freeze. Learn skills that can't be revoked. Operate with money that can't be devalued by inflation or divorce filings. That's not hustle culture, it's armor. Because the courts don't respect emotion. They respect leverage. You want custody? Show assets. You want to keep your property? Show tax fluency. You want to protect your children from a culture of confusion? Then stop being a consumer of systems and become a producer of alternatives. This is why high-status fathers don't think in months. They think in decades. While the system plays checkers with visitation rights, they're playing chess with generational wealth. They buy land, not liabilities. They build family trusts. They use private contracts. They teach their sons negotiation and their daughters discernment. Not on TikTok, but in kitchens, garages, and backyards where legacy is actually forged. And the best part? It works. Because the modern world is starving for order, for clarity, for a masculine presence that doesn't waver every time culture changes its mood. And that presence, despite what they tell you as, still magnetic. The man who leads with calm, who disciplines with love, who shows up consistently without simping for approval, that man creates gravitational pull. Women crave him. Children respect him. Other men emulate him, not because he's loud, but because he's rooted. He doesn't react. He doesn't perform. He's not chasing clout or crying in reels for empathy points. He's not healing for 15 years to avoid growing. He's built and building more. And from that frame, fatherhood becomes not just possible but powerful. That's what makes them nervous. Because for the first time in decades, fathers aren't trying to be liked. They're trying to be effective. That's the shift. No more appeasement. No more politically correct parenting that produces weak, addicted, gender-confused kids. This new wave of fathers is militant, not with fists, with frameworks. They teach boundaries, not bargaining. Hierarchy, not chaos. They understand that love without order isn't love, it's abandonment. And they lead accordingly. That's why they're attacked. Because they threaten the myth. The myth that men are optional. The myth that a family can thrive on feelings and Instagram posts. The myth that you can replace discipline with dopamine and still raise functional humans. The myth that fathers don't matter. They destroy that myth just by existing. And so the culture fights back, smearing them, misquoting them, canceling them, accusing them of extremism when all they're guilty of is clarity. But you can't cancel results. You can't meme away strong children. You can't deplatform a well-led home. You can't algorithmically suppress a man whose values are immune to trends. This is what's coming. A generation of men who don't need to be told what to do because they've already decided. Who don't parent based on fear but on vision. Who aren't fragile because they've faced the system and survived. They'll raise sons who don't fold under pressure. Daughters who don't seek male validation through screens. Families who don't turn on each other when the world gets loud. Not by luck, by design. Because the new father isn't just a man with kids. He's a strategist, a builder, a man who understands the world is rigged and builds anyway. Who prepares his children not for comfort, but for clarity. Who raises them to be uncorrupted by chaos and unafraid of truth. He doesn't need the state's permission to lead. He leads because there's no other choice. You can tell everything about a civilization by how it treats its fathers. And right now, we're a civilization in decline. A world that rewards disconnection, pernicious protection, and mocks the very structure that allowed anything to function in the first place. But here's the truth buried under all the noise. The father ice and tea, gone he's underground. Watching, training, waiting, and he's not coming back with apologies. He's coming back with answers. Because if you strip everything else away, the courts, the media, the propaganda, the masculine archetype doesn't vanish. It recalibrates. It adapts. You can't delete fatherhood. You can only distort it. But even that has limits. Because nature doesn't care about your theories. Biology doesn't take political cues. And children, they feel the absence even when no one names it. That's why the next evolution of fatherhood won't be polite. It won't be soft. It won't beg. It will assert. The new father doesn't whine. He wins. He doesn't blame the system. He builds outside of it. He doesn't argue for his right to be present. He makes his presence undeniable. He doesn't ask permission to lead. He accepts responsibility with no exit strategy. He doesn't just raise children, he forms legacies, rooted in values, hardened by clarity, immune to manipulation. He knows that every dollar he earns, every rep he hits, every book he reads is a brick in the house. His children will one day inherit not just physically, but spiritually, and they'll remember not the gifts, not the vacations, but the standards, the boundaries, the rituals, the man who didn't fold, the man who didn't outsource love to weekend visitation or identity politics, the man who stayed even when the world punished him for it. That's what lives on. Because the future isn't built by men who try to get back what was taken. It's built by men who make themselves untouchable, who choose women carefully, raise children intentionally, and protect what matters without waiting for permission from a culture that's lost all credibility. This is not about revenge. It's about renewal. Because for every boy being raised right now, watching, listening, absorbing what men are and what they aren't, there's a choice being made, a blueprint being formed. And if that boy never sees strength coupled with virtue, command paired with compassion, wealth welded to responsibility, he'll find another blueprint. One built by brokenness, by resentment, by entropy. That's how cycles start, and that's how they end. You want to end the chaos? Reinstate the father. Not just biologically, spiritually, structurally, put him back at the center, not above, not behind, at the core, where he belongs, teaching his sons to hold the line, teaching his daughters what a real man looks like, leading, not lecturing, building, not tweeting, not tweeting. That's what scares them, the men who don't need the platform, who don't need the spotlight, who just execute, who carry quiet power, who build homes that feel like fortresses not because they're decorated but because they're led. This is where it turns. The system is cracking, the state is bloated, the culture is unraveling, and fathers, we're recalibrating, we're returning. Not to protest, to build what comes after, with discipline, with precision, with fire. Because we owe it to the men who lost their children and never got to explain why, to the boys who grew up without a map and had to become cartographers just to find their own masculinity, to the daughters who deserve to be protected, not just told they were strong. We owe them better, and better doesn't come from voting, or hoping, or hashtags. It comes from structure, presence, command. It comes from men who refuse to be statistics. It comes from fathers who don't break, so raise your standards. Train like your child's future depends on it, because it does. Earn your freedom. Build your war chest. Choose your woman wisely. Lead your family like the culture is designed to destroy it, because it is. And when they ask where all the strong fathers went, they'll find them. Not in the news, not in classrooms, not in handcuffs, but at the helm of homes that don't need permission to thrive. The story isn't over. This was the Anarchist File.